Part 2 of quadratic formula. Okay, so today we are going to have to round. So before we actually do the notes, I want to remind you of how to round. We are going to round to the nearest tenths. So that means that we want one decimal place. Now, you either need to keep this number the same as it is, or it's going to increase. And the way that you know how to leave it the same or to increase it is based off the number that comes right after it. If this number is 5 or higher, then we round up. If this number is below 5, then we would leave this as it is. So if I were rounding this one, my answer would be 0.3. Okay, now the next one. This is the number that I'm going to determine if it stays 6 or if it turns into 7. It changes based off the number right after it. Since this number is higher than 5, that means this one needs to increase. So if I was rounding it, it would be 0.7. Okay. All right, one more. Now, this is the number. I'm trying to decide if it stays as a 7 or it changes to an 8. If it's 5 or higher on the next number, then this one moves up. So this one would end up being 0.8. Okay, so getting some more work with our quadratic formula, the first thing that you always want to do is label your a, b, and c values. So I'm going to write ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0 right underneath here. And I need to label all of my different pieces. So my a value is the number that's in front of the x squared. So in this case, we're talking about a -2. My b value is the number that's in front of the regular x. So in this case, we're talking about a -4. And our c value is the constant, the number without the letter attached to it. So in this case, we are looking at +3. And anytime that I am using the quadratic formula, all I'm going to do is replace all of these letters with a set of parentheses. So it goes -b plus or minus the square root of b squared. Make sure that's on the outside of your parentheses. Minus 4 times my a value and times my c value. This whole thing divided by 2 times a. And now that I have all of that done, I'm going to enter in my a, b, and c values. Now, it starts with b here and b here, so I'm plugging in -4 and -4. Then, my a value, I have one of them right here, which is -2, and I have another one down here. And finally, my c value, that one is +3. Okay, so now that we've got that step taken care of, we need to simplify. Now, when you have double negatives out in front, 2 negative signs equal a positive number. So that's really +4 plus or minus the square root of something. Now remember, if you are using your calculator for this part, you need to make sure that you actually put that -4 inside of parentheses and square it like this, because what we want is -4 times -4. If you do not put the parentheses, it is going to give you a different answer. So be very careful about that. This should be 16. Now, as far as my other numbers go, I'm multiplying a -4 times a -2. That gives me 8, and then that's multiplied times 3, which gives me +24. So I put plus 24, and this entire thing is divided by 2 times -2, which is -4. Okay, so I've got another step where I'm going to simplify and go ahead and add these two numbers underneath my radical sign. If I add 16 and 24, that gives me 40. So I'm going to write this down here. I've got 4 plus or minus the square root of 40, this whole thing divided by -4. Okay, now here's what's different about the assignment today. When you try to take the square root of 40, you are going to get this. It is not a perfect square, but we are still going to have to find our answers. So instead of actually taking the square root and then breaking up our problem, we are going to go ahead and break up the problem right now. The first one would be 4 plus the square root of 40 divided by -4. And the other one would be 4 minus the square root of 40, all of that divided by -4. So if you are using the TI-84 calculators, I'm going to show you what you can do. You can type this in. If you press alpha y equals enter, 4 plus the square root of 40, this whole thing divided by -4. When I hit enter, I got this. So I would round my answer. But remember what I said yesterday, be very careful and make sure that you do not do this because it will give you the wrong answer. So if you do not have the TI-84 calculators that can make the fraction for you, what you need to do instead is make sure that you put parentheses around the top part of your fraction when you type it in. So let me demonstrate. This is what it should be. And if I type it with parentheses, 4 plus the square root of 40, oops, delete that. You have to move over before you can get out of there. Then you do divided by -4, and I hit enter, which gives me the exact same thing. Now we are going to round to 2 decimal places on this one, or I'm sorry, 1 decimal place. So that's going to be -2.6. The number that came right after 5 right there is higher than 5, so that's why we had to round up. So there's one of my answers. Okay, for my next one, I'm doing the same thing, so you can either type it in as 4 minus the square root of 40. You have to hit the right arrow to get out from underneath that square root sign, and then move down, divided by -4. Now this one gives me this, and I'm going to show you what you do if you do not actually have the TI calculator. You can still type it in, make sure you move out, but put the top part in parentheses, then do divided by -4. Now for this one, if we're rounding, this one is going to be 0.6 because the number that comes right after 5 is a number that's 5 or higher. So I'm going to put my answers. We have -2.6 and 0.6. All right, example 5. Okay. First things first, I'm going to write ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. All right. Now my a value is the number that's in front of the x squared. If there's not actually a number that's right there, then that means your a value is 1. My b value is the number that's attached to the regular x right here. That is +4. And my c value is the constant, the number without a letter attached to it. That is -3. So let's go ahead and put together our template for the quadratic formula. Now I'm going to rewrite it right here just so that you can see it while I'm going through this, but there's no reason for you to have to rewrite this whole thing each time. Okay, so you can just start right here with me when I'm doing the blanks. It goes -b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac. This whole thing is divided by 2 times a. And now we can plug in our values. Now my b value for those first 2 blanks is 4. My a value is a +1 here and here. And my c value is -3. Okay, so let's go ahead and simplify this. When you've only got one negative sign right there, then that means your answer, or that will simplify to just be -4. Plus or minus the square root. Now this is 4 squared, which gives me 16. Then I have a -4 times 1. -4 times 1 is -4 times a -3, which is 12. Since it's +12, I put +12, and then on the bottom, 2 times 1 gives me 2. Okay, so now in the next step, before I show you that, I do want to point out for those of you who do have the TI-84 calculators, if you want to go from this step and type in everything, like 4 squared minus 4 times 1 times -3, that is also okay. Just make sure that you don't type in the whole square root symbol. So now when I add 16 and 12, those numbers underneath my radical sign, I get 28. So I'm going to simplify this into -4 plus or minus the square root of 28, this whole thing divided by 2. And since 28 is not a perfect square, so when I take the square root of 28, I get this ugly decimal, that's how I know it's not a perfect square. Since it's not, this is the place where we are going to separate your answers. And sometimes your teachers will require you to leave your answer looking like this. Okay, so we could have -4 plus the square root of 28 divided by 2. Or we could have -4 minus the square root of 28 divided by 2. And so I'm going to type this in. The first way that you can do this, if you don't have the calculator, put the top in parentheses, negative 4 plus the square root of 28. Oops, I always do that. Get out of there. And then or you can type in the whole thing all together in one step as a fraction bar. Hit enter. Now, if you are using your cell phones, a lot of the times you can actually do this on that as well. So if I just demonstrate, I have an Android phone, but if I turn it sideways, it'll let me see that I can have these parentheses right here. I can have my square root sign. So there's a lot of different calculators that you can use. Okay. So for this first one, we got 0.64. We only want one decimal place. So we have to figure out if it stays 6 or it goes up to 7. Since the number right after it is below 5, then this will stay as 0.6. Okay. All right, for the next one, that one has a minus sign. So I'm going to go ahead and change this to a minus and hit enter. Okay, this one's going to round to be negative 4.6. The number that comes right after 6 is below 5, so that's why it did not round up. So my answers are negative 4.6 and 0.6. And here's my little squiggly lines all the way around. Okay, one more example. Number 6. Okay, I've got ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. My a value is the number in front of the x squared. In this case, there's nothing there, so my a value is 1. My b value is the number in front of the regular x, so in this case, we are talking about 6. And my c value is the constant, the number without the letter, that is positive 10. And once again, I like to go ahead and rewrite my formula just so that I can point out to you what I'm plugging in as I go through. There's no reason for you to rewrite that whole thing again. But I do want you to do the blanks. So negative b, following this, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c. This whole thing is divided by 2 times a. Okay, so my b value is 6, goes here and here. My a value is 1, I put that here and here. And my c value is 10. So now we need to simplify in the next step. I've only got one negative sign in front of my 6, so that's just negative 6 plus or minus the square root. Now 6 squared means 6 times 6, so that is 36. As far as the other numbers go, you've got a negative 4 times 1 times 10, which gives us minus 40. Okay, and on the bottom row, 2 times 1 gives me 2. So now whenever I take this and I simplify, well, 36 minus 40 is actually a negative 4. So I've got negative 6 plus or minus the square root of negative 4. This whole thing divided by 2. And just to remind you, because this is something we talked about on the first part of notes 2, if you have a negative number underneath your square root sign, then we do not have a real answer. So I would like for you to make this note, negative sign under the square root sign. That means no real solution. And as a quick reminder, I want to show you why it is considered no solution. Remember, solutions are just another way of saying x-intercepts. So if I took that equation and I graphed it, it is never going to actually touch the x-axis. So that is why it has no real solutions. Okay, now that you have finished this, you need to do problems 5 through 8 on the worksheet.